Today on CityCast Denver, the density debate in Littleton is getting nasty. One of the mayoral candidates challenging pro-density incumbent Kyle Schlachter was recently caught on a Ring camera swiping Schlachter's campaign materials from a front porch and replacing it with his own. So how will voters decide? And what will it mean for people across the metro area? I sat down with Schlachter earlier this year to hear how this debate over so-called gentle density ended up on the ballot and what might be on those stolen campaign flyers. Today is Thursday, October 16th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Mayor Kyle Schlachter, welcome to CityCast Denver.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
So for folks who aren't familiar, can you just describe Littleton?
Littleton is a small town in the southern suburbs of Denver. Pretty much I tell people we're between Bellevue on the north, C-470 in the south, Sheridan on the west, and Broadway on the east, roughly speaking.
Okay. And would you consider yourself suburban, I guess? Like the landscape, sort of what does Littleton look like?
So it's diverse. We have our own distinct downtown, a historic downtown that's over 100 years old. We have lots of different neighborhoods, various commercial districts. And so we are, I would say, a city within a larger city.
I agree. I think it's one of those outside of Denver proper where you actually get to have your own downtown that's has its own personality and it's very identifiable.
It is, and that's one of the things that people love about Littleton, that it has its own unique identity.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. So, can you describe this fight you're in the middle of right now when it comes to this Rooted in Littleton group and the petition that they've been circulating?
Yeah, so there's a petition circulating right now to basically freeze our residential land uses, our single-family residential land uses. And this stemmed from an ordinance that the city considered last year, and the final reading of it was in January of 2025. And so there's a group of citizens that were upset about city council taking a look at how we can incorporate what we term missing middle housing into the community. And that ordinance was killed back in January. So there's no housing proposal right now, no policy, no issue we're looking at right now. And this group of citizens put together a petition to say we want to just stop any change in single family residential zone districts right now. And that's kind of where they're at right now, getting signatures for that.
So it's sort of stopping the ability for the city to build other types of housing. You said missing middle. So duplexes, fourplexes, ADUs. Is that what we're talking about?
Those were the things that were part of the ordinance that we looked at last year. And the way the petition is written, it would be for a charter amendment to put into our charter, which is akin to the city's constitution, a freeze on uses in single-family residential zones as it stood in January of 2025, so taking us backwards. And that's what we would only be able to not change any of the uses that are in there. And most of our single-family residential zones are specific to single-family detached buildings.
One type of housing.
One type of housing.
Essentially. And a change to a city charter is no small business. I mean, that's a big deal.
That is a big deal, yes.
Where do you stand on this issue?
I am against this petition and against this charter amendment for a variety of reasons. One, it's taking this policy, land use policy, and putting it into the charter where it really doesn't belong. It should be in city code. And then the other thing is that it is so ambiguously worded that not even the organizers really know or agree on what the resulting impacts will be. The one thing that everyone does agree on is it will result in lawsuits, one way or the other.
So I guess what would putting something in the charter like that do to a city like Littleton?
Well, one of the things, if you there's a variety of different readings of the petition language there. One of them would say we couldn't do any adjustments or amendments or anything to the city code there. And so it would basically handcuff the city, be able to adjust with the times or even come into compliance with state law. I know the General Assembly has taken local land use up as one of their causes of late here. And so that would also potentially be a conflict there, that we would not be able to change anything with the uses of those single-family residential zone districts.
And for someone who's maybe not familiar, those changes happen fairly often in cities, right? I mean, as we grow or as our populations decline, like I feel like it's just important for folks to understand why zoning is like you say zoning and you just fall asleep. But it's so
zoning
crucial.
It's very complex and complicated and very important. And zoning is basically setting the kind of the framework or the rules by which people can, operate and do things. Kind of big picture. And then you get into the code, which is details how you can build those things or how you can use those things, not necessarily what's there. The zone districts say what can go there, and then the code says how they can be built. And those get changed fairly frequently, yes.
So if it went into the charter, it would be sort of frozen in amber.
Correct.
Which, I don't know, that sounds stressful to me.
It is hard. All of our cities, Denver, all the cities in the metro area have grown and changed over time. If you look back even every 10 years, you go backwards in time, how different our communities look and change and are able to adapt with the times.
So you've interacted with this group rooted in Littleton. What have they told you, or what do you take from this petition? Like, what do you think is behind it for them?
Well, the petition actually surprised me because this has been a very long process. This goes back to 2017 when we had our housing study done, which is now woefully outdated. We actually updated our comprehensive plan in 2019 after a 2-year process. Then we updated our code, which was a result of the comprehensive plan, and went little bit by little bit, looked at affordable housing in our multifamily zones, and then wanted to say, well, how do we not focus on just multifamily development? Is there a way we can look at allowing smaller, gentle density, as you will? And when we had this discussion all of last year, we had people come out and speak in favor of it. We had lots of the community members that were supportive of it. I was a little surprised at the time that there wasn't more opposition, but also I wasn't terribly surprised because it wasn't a huge dramatic change. We were wanting to give our residents the ability to use their properties as they saw fit. We had requests for people to put in accessory dwelling units or ADUs. We had some requests for duplexes and triplexes. I mean, I was one of the people 10 years ago that looked at adding an ADU into my property for my mother-in-law. And it's
a mother-in-law apartment is a great way to think about it.
It was a mother-in-law apartment, and we weren't allowed to do that. And so the alternative that she actually purchased the house next to us. And so she's living in a 5-bedroom house all by herself, which is not the best use of space there. And so at the end of this kind of 16-month discussion about adding duplexes and triplexes to Littleton, a group of residents heard about it. I was kind of surprised that they hadn't heard about it because we had public meetings. It had been in the newspaper. It had been on social media. And they spoke up that they hadn't heard about it and they were upset with it. And so the city council paused. We said, okay, wow, we clearly did not do a good enough job of getting the communication out there. Let's bring this group of people in to help us figure out what might make sense. What are the issues that they had concerns with? They said they want to be part of the solution, want to be part of the process. And so we said, great, let's pause it. We may come back to this in a year or two or down the line. And so I thought we kind of hit a reset button here. So we'll start from the beginning, go forward. And then this petition came kind of out of nowhere. To me, it is almost a bad faith effort to kind of negotiate and be part of the solution here. And it's kind of the exact opposite, going in the opposite direction here.
Well, so part of this petition found that 54% of Littletonians who responded to it were opposed to any increase in density. How did you take the results of that survey?
That survey was interesting because I was actually one of the people that took the survey, and the way it was worded, I actually thought it came from the city, and I didn't realize that the city had put something out, which we hadn't. And as I was taking the survey, I started to realize that it probably came from this group because the questions were very leading. It seemed like they were trying to get a specific result there, and so when I looked at the results, I kind of didn't really, take them much to heart because it was, kind of almost biased result there.
So, with your mayor, what do you say to folks who maybe like Littleton, quote, like the way it is right now?
You can count me as one of those people. I love my neighborhood. I love my neighbors. If my neighborhood didn't change, that'd be great. I live there for a reason. But I also have to look at it that I don't have as an individual person, the ability to tell my neighbor, sorry, you can't use your property the way it is. We have a mix of different housing types in my neighborhood, and I think that's a good thing to be able to say, no, you can't change how you use your house. I think that is a bit of an overreach, and I think that's kind of how zoning, generally speaking, in this country and in the state are kind of onerous and don't allow people to kind of adjust the uses as they see fit.
I'm just thinking more about this. And you said, my mother-in-law bought the house next to us that had 4 or 5 bedrooms in it. That's really hard to find in Denver, which is why I think a lot of folks do go to places like Littleton because they need a bigger home. But also I think about, who do I know that lives in Littleton? It's mostly my friends' parents. My friends have moved out and they can't afford to move back maybe to the neighborhood where they grew up if they even wanted to. And I just think about that sometimes when we talk about keeping things exactly how they are in this moment.
Right. And it's a lot of the people we hear from say, oh, they moved to Littleton in the 60s or 70s and they don't want it to change. And if you look that far back, it's changed dramatically.
It's changed so much.
So much, yes.
There's like farmland that was there. You know what I mean? Like, that's a big change.
Yeah.
So we were doing some research actually in Littleton and observed that the population has actually been going down over the past few years. Why do you think that's happening?
Because people are aging in place. As you said, your friends' parents still live there. Friends grew up and moved out and can't move back. And so I think that's part of it. Then also, there hasn't been a whole lot of development of housing. There's been a few small pockets, but we're a pretty landlocked community. And I think that's the major portion of that is if you have a family of 4 or 5 people and the kids move out, now you have 2 people where there were 4 or 5 there. And so, I mean, even in my neighborhood, there is kind of a slow change over here where when we moved in, roughly 15 years ago, we were the only family that had young kids there. And now there's, 7 or 8 other families within 1 block radius that have young kids. So it's this kind of cycle of change here, but yeah.
Do you think that is a problem, the declining population or the inability for some folks to be able to afford the place they grew up in?
I think the inability to afford housing is a huge problem. I think our whole region has gotten so expensive and people need a place to live. And I think all communities should want to be able to find that mix of what works for them. I don't want to say every single community needs to have every single type of housing in equal numbers, but I think it is important that working families or people right out of college can find a place to live that they can afford and are not cost burdened with that. And I think the policy that we looked at last year was a iterative step in that direction there. I know a lot of the petitioners talk about the city wanting to bulldoze entire neighborhoods, and that was not at all the intent or what we thought would be the result. If I thought that was the result of that policy, I would have voted no. I would have said, no, this is not the right thing. But to allow a few duplexes or triplexes to pop up around the community, I think that was a good thing.
This episode is brought to you by Denver Film. Because movie lovers across the city are getting hyped. It's almost time for Denver's biggest celebration of cinema, and you don't want to miss it. I'm talking red carpets, celebs, Hollywood moguls, exclusive parties and VIP events, and you can be a part of it. Honestly, I've always had a great time at Denver Film Fest. Not only do they bring out so many good movies that you can just show up to basically a random theater on a Tuesday night on a whim and see something interesting, but you also have a chance to dress up nice, go out to a packed screening of one of the year's best, because they always bring the best. The Film Fest returns for its 48th year, running from October 31st to November 9th. They're featuring over 200 of the world's best new films, as well as all kinds of other great events. Choose your adventure and get tickets at denverfilm.org. That's denverfilm.org.
Hi, I'm Michael Zibiak, Chief Revenue Officer of CityCast. Why do most of us want to learn a new language? It's because we want to speak it out in the real world with real people. Babbel gets you there fast. My daughter's a senior in high school, and after she graduates, we're taking a father-daughter trip to Spain. I know, she's spoiled, but that's on me. I'll be honest, my Spanish right now is pretty much tops out at ¿Dónde está la biblioteca? But when we get there, I want to actually talk to people, order food, and really connect with the locals. not just stumble through the basics. That's why I'm starting with Babbel. Learning a language with Babbel is all about small steps, big wins, and progress you can actually track and feel. And with how busy things get here at CityCast, I love that Babbel's bite-sized, 10-minute lessons fit perfectly into my day, whether it's between meetings or while I'm having coffee in the morning. I'm really excited to start picking up real-world Spanish before our trip so we can experience Spain in a more meaningful way. Right now, Babbel has a special deal for our listeners. Get up to 55% off your subscription at babbel.com/citycast. That's BABBEL.com/citycast for up to 55% off. Rules and restrictions may apply. Gracias and adios.
Do you consider yourself a YIMBY?
I would say probably more YIMBY than NIMBY, but I think it's I'm probably right in the middle.
Okay. Safe spot to be.
Yeah.
So we were kind of talking about this earlier, like what's happening at the state level or what Governor Polis wants to do. And he recently threatened to withhold a bunch of state funding from municipalities that don't want to implement his new laws aimed at increasing density. But now a bunch of Denver's other suburbs are suing to stop him. And it seems like you and him are aligned, though, on a lot of these core issues. Where do you stand with that?
So I do agree with the results of allowing more housing options. And this idea of increasing density, I'm not for increasing density for density's sake. I'm for increasing housing options. And if we have 5 or 10 duplexes that go up in a single family residential zone, the density itself doesn't increase that much. If you look at the numbers, if there's 500 homes and now there are 490 homes and 10 duplexes, the density itself doesn't change. But the options for people, there's a few, even just 1 or 2 is 1 or 2 families that are able to afford and move into a neighborhood here. And I think where I disagree with the governor's approach is that it's a one size fits all for the entire state, where each of our communities, what works in Littleton may not work in Thornton, or what works in Greenwood Village may not work in Littleton. And so I support and commend the other communities that are standing up to the state. Littleton has no desire to join.
So you would not join the lawsuit?
Not join the lawsuit right now, no. But I think the idea that the cities know our communities best, and our city council and myself specifically stood up, had resolutions, spoke out against the governor for doing that, and say, we know what we're doing here. We are doing it correctly. We are making progress. And one of the things with the lack of building isn't necessarily the cities or the zoning or the entitlements. It's other aspects that we have no control over, the inflation, bank rates, cost of labor, being able to actually build. There, during the discussion for the state bills a few years ago, Arapahoe County did a survey of what all the communities are. We had over 110,000 units that had been approved to be built. And so the cities, they had done that work. It was up on the developers and the banks and the contractors to get all that done. And so the idea that the cities themselves with our policies were the problem, I think, was kind of an incorrect assumption.
I just think it's interesting because my assumption with the way the governor is approaching it is we know that this is a problem across the state, mountain towns to, the urban core. Everyone's struggling with affordability in different types of housing. So I can see why he tried to do this at a statewide level, but then it's like we're coming back to the same problem.
But it really wasn't a state level. It was also focused on cities greater than 5,000 population or whatever the number ended up at. So but it had to be a municipality. So Littleton has a larger, we call it Greater Littleton, Highlands Ranch and Jefferson County have Littleton mailing addresses, but they're not part of the city. And those
interesting
areas were not included in some of these mandates there. And so I think that's
Do you feel like it was like an unfair burden for certain municipalities to maybe have to take it on?
I think it was unfair that certain areas had to deal with this, and then just on the other side of a street where people didn't even realize that they're not part of the city were exempt.
What would be the ideal outcome for you when it comes to whatever the next steps are? Or where are you? I guess, where is Littleton right now when it comes to the density question?
We're still having a discussion. I think If this petition is successful and gets a question on the ballot for a charter amendment, that would be a interesting discussion during a campaign season coming up here in 2025 with municipal elections. What I hope and what I see moving forward is to have a discussion with more people in our community about what they would like to see in our community, how we can work together to provide options for people in our neighborhoods to be able to buy homes, types of homes they want to buy. We don't have a whole lot of attached single family homes without stairs for some of our more senior residents to move into. And I think that's one of the things is we have people that are aging in place in their 4 or 5 bedroom, 4,000 square foot homes that they don't want to move out. They may want to find a 1,500 square foot or 1,000 square foot patio home, but there's not that product available. And
they don't exist in the neighborhood.
They don't really exist. Yeah.
Yeah. My in-laws are kind of in this, thinking about this right now. They live in Littleton. They're eventually going to want to move to that, one level house, and there may not be an option for that, Well, so with this Rooted in Littleton group and the petition, there's been talk of them backing a candidate to run for mayor. And just thinking about that survey showing all this support for them, are you worried that November could be the end of your dream for Littleton?
Worried? You never know how elections come out. I stopped predicting elections about 10 years ago.
I think a lot of folks
So
did.
I think there is a lot of support for me and for these types of policies in the community. And so it was interesting during the discussion, and even till this day, talking to people, when I kind of explain what the issue is and the policy was and my ideas, people are like, oh, that doesn't sound so bad. It doesn't sound like you're going to bulldoze entire neighborhoods or put up, 8-story apartment buildings next door to me. And I think that's one of the things when you talk about what the policy was and how it would actually come to life is saying that you can put a duplex in a certain single family zone area doesn't mean a duplex can fit on every single parcel. There are still other rules and regulations that they have to abide by. And that review process would have still been in place. And there were lots of places where people say, oh, I want to do this, and say, sorry, it's not going to work there. It won't fit there. And so I think that's this idea that the fear was that we were coming in with bulldozers, or as I said before, with an axe or a hammer, where it was maybe just a scalpel here or there with just kind of a small change in certain places.
Well, you mentioned sort of explaining what this could actually look like in practice versus what maybe the information out there was. What do you think about this group's argument that they didn't feel like they were informed or that no one got in touch with them as the city started to think about this?
No, I take that to heart. I think it just went to show that we were kind of in an echo chamber, that we were hearing from people that supported it and didn't hear from a lot of the people. It is interesting being on city council to sit in this room with sometimes, 2 or 3 residents. I'd much rather have, 20, 30, 40, 100 people every single night paying attention. And it's important that everyone in our community feels like that they're not just feels like they're getting the information, but truly is being informed of what's going on and has the ability to participate and express their opinions. And that's not to say we will do what everyone says, because we can't make 45,000 people happy all at the same time, or kind of put in everyone's opinions, because there's lots of conflicting opinions. And one of city council's roles is to look at the big picture and figure out what is best for the broader community, for as many people as possible, for the long run. It may not be just right now, but we have to look 5, 10, 15 years into the future to make sure that we're setting up our entire community for success.
Speaking of that future, what do you think happens to Littleton if this petition does gather that steam and gets on the ballot and does make this big change?
I think it'll take us backwards quite a bit. I know Littleton in the past was kind of known for not being a great place to do business or build a house. And I think these last 6 or 8 years here, we've made some progress in updating our zoning to allow new types of uses of how people use the land. And it's actually attracting lots of different types of businesses that are coming into Littleton. And I do worry that if this were to pass, that we'd be set back years. It would just drag out the fight even more. And the big thing that it scares me is that we would be inviting unnecessary lawsuits, because if we don't allow accessory dwelling units, which we just passed a few weeks ago, per the writing of the petition, we would have to go back to January, and our code would be in conflict with the charter. There's also some conflict with the state constitution about timing of when things can be reversed and whatnot. So
it'd be actually like going backward.
It would actually be going backwards, or we'd have to sue to say, no, we can't, put this in retroactively after we already passed it. And then we'd have lawsuits, arguing the opposite direction there.
So Denver's about to sort of start this journey of changing the law to allow for more duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes in this, quote, what we call gentle density. You're in the middle of this fight right now. Do you have any advice for Denver?
Make sure the residents know what's going on and make sure that you get feedback from them. I think that's the important thing is, everyone on city council, all 7 of us, do this because we want to make a difference and improve our community. We may have differences of opinions on how to do that, but I think it's important that we listen to the people that we represent and have thoughtful and civil discussions about what the future may look like.
Mayor Schlachter, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell mayoral candidate Patrick Driscoll about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. And hey, thanks to our new neighbor, Benjamin Stein, who just joined our membership program. You can support this show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Denver neighbor today at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye. I sat down with the Schlachter. I sat down with the Schlackman.